Welcome to the Artist on Point podcast, where you discover both hidden and established talent in the realms of music, art, film, and writing, and gain valuable insights into the business side of each industry and what it truly takes to succeed as an independent artist. Hello and welcome to Artists on Point. My guest today is Ron Malhotra. He's an award-winning wealth planner, renowned thought leader, entrepreneur, international best-selling author, speaker, and business mentor. Ron's also the founder of The Successful Male, the managing director of Maple Tree Wealth Management and Black-Footed Business Advisors. His content has been viewed over 100 million times, and he has been featured in Forbes, Money Magazine, Entrepreneur Magazine, and a host of other mainstream publications and media around the world. Welcome, Ron. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, David. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. It's been a while. I've known Ron for five or 6 years now, so quite a while. And we recently reconnected. And since starting this podcast, I thought Ron would be a great guest to have on because he's written, as I mentioned before, a number of books. So we'll get started. First question really is, at what point in your career, because I know you've had quite an expansive career across a bunch of different industries, what was the thought process around becoming a published author? What made you really want to start writing books in the first place?
Well, most of my work experience actually has been in one industry, financial services. And after having experience working for large corporates and then small businesses and medium-sized businesses, I decided to start my own traditional business. My first traditional business that I started was the wealth advisory firm, which I still have. But I've always had a passion for education. I suppose advisory in a way is educating people, but I felt that after I'd worked in wealth advisory for 20 years, I started to see the connection between psychology and wealth creation. So once I got interested in psychology, I just wanted to know everything about it. And that's how I came across the world of personal development. And as I started to delve deep into personal development, it was like a whole new world. I started to realize at that point that most of my education through the academic education system and the professional education I had acquired had given me very limited perspectives. And I started to make the connection that how we educated is very limited. There is a narrowing of education, which assumes that academic and professional excellence makes you highly intelligent and successful. Yeah. So I started to realize that there was a lot of gaps in my learning, and I started to realize that despite the fact that I had reasonable career success and financial success, I didn't feel successful. And that kind of led me down this path of exploration and discovery to try and understand what does it actually mean to be holistically successful. And then as I started to connect the dots and find the answers, I just wanted to bring a new perspective to personal development, especially as it connects to money and accomplishments. And that's what prompted me to start writing books and start sharing my experiences and thoughts. So, but really, if people say to me, who are you? You do a lot of things. We have multiple brands and companies, but really deep down at a spiritual level, I feel I'm a teacher. Right. And whether I'm advising, consulting, speaking, writing, coaching, mentoring, training, they're all forms of teaching, essentially. I just have a passion for teaching. And I feel like I have the ability to take complex concepts that are disconnected, connect them, see the interconnectedness between them, dissect them, simplify them, and present them in a way that people can understand and apply. Yeah. So that's been the quest for the last 13 years.
Right. It is very important to, there are so many concepts out there that we really must learn in order to be successful. And obviously these things can be complicated. It is really good and refreshing to find someone that does that, that simplifies things, because, everybody learns in different ways. And, one way is, it's not going to be necessarily great for another person.
Yeah, that's true. And I think for me, the real awakening moment was when I started to realize that the real elements of life that result in fulfillment, joy, accomplishment are really not taught in the education system. And so it's really incumbent upon the individual to then seek out that wisdom, because today I actually put a tweet which said that There's one way you can identify people who love life, and how you can identify people who love life is you'll see that people who love life, they're always on the quest for three things. One is freedom, second one is growth, third is wisdom. Now, if you actually start to observe how people live and how they behave, you'll find that the vast majority of people have no sense of urgency for freedom, growth, or wisdom.
Yeah.
And the way I interpret that is that you're not really in love with life. Some people may disagree with me, but I kind of think that you demonstrate your love, because anyone can say I love life, but really, if you love life, because the quest for freedom, growth, and wisdom is the quest for living a whole life, right? And so for me, I've always been driven that way, but I didn't have direction for so many years, and I just realized that the way the whole system, the social construct works, is that we are all trained to think a certain way, and we're all trained to make a living, but we're not really trained to think of questions beyond that. And as somebody who loves to teach, I'm glad that I have this absolute hunger to find the truth. I think I was indoctrinated for the first 31 years of my life. But I really feel that, as my mind's starting to open up, I see the world very differently now, like compared to what I used to. And I think that's why you and I reconnected as well, because I know that you've always been, it appears to me that you've been a truth seeker for a long time. And I guess part of the pain that you have as a truth seeker is that, number one, you once you are no longer a part of I suppose once you're no longer looking at the world through, and once you're no longer looking at the world through these rose-colored glasses, you do see some brutal truths around humanity. You see some brutal truths around how the education system's constructed or the political system's constructed. And once you start to, part of that truth is disturbing, obviously. And I think at that point, you have to make a choice. Do you keep going deeper and exploring more? Or because it's disturbing, do you retreat and go back to your indoctrinated world because it appears to be a lot more peaceful? And I think the reason I believe you and I reconnected is because although both of us have been seeking truth, I think over a period of time, it's abundantly clear to me that no matter how disturbing the truth is, you have no desire to go back to the construct. You want to keep going deep into it, and I think that was, I admire that in people only because very few people have the courage and the character to keep going deep. And so I thought, well, this is good that very few people in my circle I know are searching the truth. And so it was good to hear that you are. And so I felt, it was absolutely necessary for us to reconnect again. So thank you for thinking of me and inviting me to your podcast.
No, don't mention it. You touched on a number of points there, and obviously there's a lot going on in the world, and you've actually got a book coming out. When's your new book going to be dropping?
Yeah, so interestingly and coincidentally, in early 2020, I decided that I was going to write a book on indoctrination. Because I was convinced, early 2020, I had realized that the way we are educated is very narrow, and it's almost a form of brainwashing. And I started to 100%. Observe that a number of the behaviors that are rewarded in the conventional education system, are actually punished in the real world. And vice versa, a lot of the behaviors that are rewarded in the conventional education system the ones that are punished in the education system are rewarded in the real world. So I decided that I wanted to study the origins of the education system. And then when the whole pandemic thing started to happen, I think it reconfirmed for me that a lot of people did not know how to think. And, I know that when we were doing stuff together, we were already talking about the fact that a lot of people don't know actually how to think. They do a surface level dive into complex concepts, and a majority of people would prioritize feelings over facts, or a lot of people cannot make the distinction between beliefs and facts. So I already knew that, but I think for me, when I started to see how people were behaving and how quickly they needed to get to closure and how quickly they made up their mind about one of the most contentious and complex issues in our world, or in our life anyway, it convinced me that I really needed to continue to write this book, because I wanted to expose the fact that there is indoctrination at the religious, cultural level at the media level, but I wanted to start with the indoctrination that happens at the education level. And as somebody who is, an educationist, I really wanted to delve deep into it. So so the book comes out. It's now sitting with the editor. The book is called Indoctrinated: How the Conventional Education System Perpetuates Mediocrity, Conformity, and Indistinguishability. Obviously, the current situation is still emerging, so I have made some references to it, but really for me, it was ultimately about the fact that anyone that has a need to quickly form a conclusion and has complete faith in authority and is not prepared to examine things is indoctrinated. And I talk about in the first page, I said there are only 3 steps required to indoctrinate anybody. Number 1, repeat the message often, almost relentlessly.
Which is
Number
what's
2,
happening. Yeah.
Well, which is what's happening. Number 2, ensure that it creates a negative emotional impact in the receiver. Ideally, a manifestation of fear, guilt, shame, anxiety, one of those. And third, ensure that it's endorsed or supported by people who are considered to be people of authority. So that's really all it takes to indoctrinate people. And the issue is that people who are indoctrinated don't know that they're indoctrinated. Like I didn't know for many years I was indoctrinated, right?
Right.
But one of the ways you know a person who's heavily indoctrinated is that when they're confronted with the truth, instead
or even just an alternative, it might not be the truth, but just an alternative theory or an alternative perspective.
A perspective, instead of them feeling curious or fascinated, they generally get upset. And they start to close up. And so I think that's, to me, generally, that's a sign of how deep the indoctrination is. And it should be a concern, because the issue is that it's not so much about shaming people for their indoctrination. It's more to make them realize that if they are indoctrinated, then they are susceptible to emotional manipulation by those who understand advanced psychology, right?
Right.
And the more you succumb to other people's manipulative psychological tactics, the less autonomous and independent you are being about the choices you're making. So it's just about kind of showing them that link, which is what I attempted to do. And it's a very difficult thing because, thinking is such a subjective exercise. It's not something that's taught in schools. It's not something tangible. So to try and bring light to that topic was certainly challenging. Whilst I can observe people's thinking and behavioral patterns, to actually put it in some sort of a structured format in a book was certainly challenging.
How did you overcome some of those challenges?
Well, I tried to use by using examples, and I tried to use a number of examples, and I tried to talk about, I've shared a lot of my observations and experiences. There's simply not a ton of primary research on this subject, because you think about it, right? And the education system is designed exactly, it's working in exactly the way the designers intended it to work.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have to really go back and look at history, and you've got to look at the fact that human beings have gone from being hunter-gatherers to then going into the agricultural economy, going from the agricultural economy to the industrial revolution to the information age, and then from the information age to now what we call the social/digital/entrepreneurial age. And one of the things you'll see if you actually start to look around is a lot of people are still stuck in the information age. Or a lot of people still have the industrial revolution mindset. So that's a sign of indoctrination, somebody who is not adapting and not seeing what's actually happening. And so it was, for me, it was just reflecting back on a lot of the examples that I had come across, but to help people understand that indoctrination happens in religion, it happens in culture, it happens in so many places in our society. And when you're indoctrinated, you just blindly accept a belief, philosophy, or practice that has been perpetuated, and you don't question it, and you certainly don't challenge it. And the risks of that, because I attribute the ability today because let's talk about what intelligence is. I believe that the true test of intelligence is demonstrated in an individual's ability to be able to design the life and lifestyle that they want. So any individual that can get out of life what they really want is someone who is demonstrating intelligence, regardless of whether or not they have an academic or professional background. Okay. So because number one, it requires for them to know exactly who they are, exactly what they want, and then for them to put plans and strategies to actually make that happen. So to me, that's an intelligent individual. The vast majority of people fail their own definition of success. The majority of people will tell you they don't have the exact life and lifestyle that they want. Part of the problem is they don't know what they want. The other part of that is if they know what they want, they don't actually know how to get it, because you need to make a series of good decisions in life to be able to get what you want. The problem with people who are indoctrinated but don't know that they're indoctrinated is that they believe that they're doing okay in life because they don't self-reflect. And I think you have to be brutally honest. You've got to look at yourself in the mirror and go, have I been able to get what I want out of life? Do I have the health and vitality and energy that I want? Do I have the peace of mind that I want? Do I have the meaningful relationships that I want? Do I have meaningful work, inspiring work that I want? Do I have financial security or financial abundance that I want? I mean, they're the basic things. Apart from that, you may have a need for contribution, influence, impact. But a lot of people don't engage in any self-reflection, right? Because it's hard. It's hard. So for me, it's just about bringing that to the surface. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I think if you're going to ever fix a deep-rooted system, it's got to start with exposing the system and asking questions, and then gradually moving towards some sort of solution.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Self-reflection is very difficult, and it goes back to what you were saying before. It's like, do you keep going and seeking the truth, or do you just retreat back into safety or what you know what's familiar? Unfortunately, and this is why we're in this situation now, is most people choose the latter, and they don't keep going because it's not easy. So your new book, is it going to be encompassing all, religion and media and the school system, or is it mostly just the school system?
Well, the emphasis is on the indoctrination that happens through the education system, but I have used examples of indoctrination outside of the education system to demonstrate the workings of indoctrination, because the indoctrinator is somebody who consciously or subconsciously understands the process of indoctrination. So we can't evolve as humanity. We can't evolve. We have still, I mean, you look at the world right now, we're still plagued with a lot of problems that are systemic and intergenerational. We still have problems with our justice system. We have problems with organizational change. We have problems with inspiration and joy. We have problems with wealth disparity. These problems can't be solved just purely by educating people through academics and giving them professional skills. What I have identified is that there are three core elements of holistic education beyond academic and professional education. Number one is what I call discovery and mastery of self. That incorporates a number of elements: knowing who you are, knowing what you want, knowing how your mind works, knowing how your emotions work, knowing how your behaviors work, knowing your goals, knowing your vision, having clarity in your purpose, passion, values, and strengths. So that's all of that falls under what I call understanding and mastery of self. For some reason, none of these elements are included in the education system or professional work system. Even if you go through professional training through a corporate, it's very superficial. If they do a personality test, it's typically very, very superficial and at a very basic level. The second element that I believe that is also missing is what I call the understanding and mastery of business and financial fundamentals. Since we are in an economic world, whether we like it or not, and there is a construct around the way the economy works, you need to know how not just to make money, but how to keep money and how to multiply money. And again, that's something that is not taught. A lot of people would assume that they don't need business skills if they're working for somebody else, but that's not true, because if you don't have an entrepreneurial mindset, you are naturally going to have an entitlement mindset, and your career is not going to go very far. So even if you're never going to start your own business, I think it's important to have entrepreneurial skills and entrepreneurial mindset. So the second part of what's missing in the education system is an understanding of business and financial fundamentals. What baffles me is the fact that, when we throw people in the money game, and what is the money game? Anyone that has income, anyone that has expenses, anyone that's paying taxes in the money game. Simple. But majority of players in the money game don't know the rules of money and don't know how to read the scoreboard of money. So imagine any sport, right? You think about tennis or cricket. Let's just talk about cricket, for example. Let's just say you're an excellent batsman, but you don't know how to read the scoreboard, and you don't understand the rules of cricket. Even if you're an excellent batsman, you can't win a game when you don't understand the rules and you can't read the scoreboard. Now, imagine we've taken hundreds of millions of people, professionals and graduates, we've thrown them into the money game. Go and make an income. You have expenses, you have to pay tax. You're in the money game. But they have no idea how to calculate, how to read the scoreboard. They don't know what the real determinant of financial health should be. They don't know how to measure that. And they don't understand the rules of money and wealth. So it's almost a mathematical certainty that the vast majority, despite their skills, despite their professional education, despite their academic education, when it comes to money, they're going to fail that game. It's a mathematical certainty. And it just baffles me that it's been left out of the education system. I'm not going to speculate on whether it's been deliberate or not, but it's bizarre.
I think
and the third element,
I think we both know why.
Well, yeah, and I think in the last couple of years, I think both you and I have looked at how this system of control works, and you can only reasonably speculate that there is a reason why people are not empowered to be independent, autonomous thinkers, to think like capitalists, to think like entrepreneurs, to think like investors. It almost appears to me that in the Industrial Revolution, we were creating blue-collar workers to work in factories. In the information age, we were creating white-collar workers to work for corporations and governments.
Right.
But not really teaching people how to create, innovate, disrupt, discover, invent, and just to follow a system and not question it. And any type of dissent is seen as disobedience. And just like it's punished in schools and universities, it's punished in the corporate world, and it's generally punished in society as well. And we're seeing examples of that with the fact that anyone that questions the COVID narrative today is, demonized for questioning it. And the third element that I believe that's missing in the education system, the first one was understanding and mastery of self. The second one was understanding and mastery of business and financial fundamentals. The third one is the understanding and mastery of spiritual laws, and understanding of what does it mean to be human, understanding our energetic nature, not just our biological nature, understanding our obligation and connection with the world, understanding consciousness, understanding the connection between physical and the metaphysical. Again, that's been left out conveniently. And as a consequence, even those in our society who are economically successful, financially successful, or commercially successful, a lot of the times don't demonstrate the character, the depth, the ethical and moral compass, the consciousness that we would expect of the most successful in our society. So when we see people who we consider to be successful, oh, they've got money, they're running a business, or they're really at the top of their game. They're successful in their career, but what are they doing for humanity? What are they doing for the world? Right? Are they self-serving? And that's what we'll find, that predominantly even those who have mastered economic and business fundamentals tend to demonstrate very average or low levels of consciousness towards humanity, towards ethics and morality, and then you look at children. What model do they have? So the parents say, "Well, I want you to be like Uncle Eric, or I want you to be like Auntie Jenny, because Uncle Eric runs this big corporation, Auntie Jenny runs this big hospital." But we don't look at anything else. We don't look at whether they're conscious human beings. We don't look at whether they're making a contribution. We don't look at whether they have meaning in their life. And the reality is there are 4 types of good lives, and everyone has to decide what kind of good life they want. The first level is what we call a happy life. You have a happy life means you have peace, you have some friends, you have some good things in life. That's a happy life. And I think subconsciously, vast majority of people want a happy life, but it's only level 1. The second level is what we call a productivity-based life. So you're not just seeking happiness. You actually want to produce something. You want to perform, right? So that's the second level of a good life. The third level of a good life is a meaning-based life. You're actually seeking some meaning. You want to do something that's important, that means something. And the fourth level is what we call a wisdom-based life, right? So happiness-based life, productivity-based life, meaning-based life, and a wisdom-based life. The problem is there's a negative correlation between a happiness-based life and a wisdom-based life. If you are the type of person who is going to seek wisdom, it's going to come at a cost. You have to you have to go through a
You got to
failure
make a lot of
adversity.
mistakes, or
You're going to
learn
make a
some
lot of
hard
mistakes
lessons.
because and the reason for that, and you're absolutely right, the reason for that is you have to expose yourself to diverse experiences. And every time you're doing a lot of different things, you're going to fail at a lot of things. You're also going to have to confront the brutal reality of life. There is a duality in life. Not everything is but life is not a bed of roses. You're going to be misunderstood. You're going to feel disconnected. At times, you're going to feel very isolated. So you have to decide, do you stop at happiness? You've got some basic needs met. You've got the money coming in. You've got people like you. You've got a few friends to hang out with. You've got peace of mind. You can stop at that, or you can continue to go beyond that all the way to a wisdom-based life. The wisdom-based life is a little bit more chaotic in the middle, right? Because you can't just bypass adversity and get to wisdom, right?
Right.
And so a lot of people, that's why don't want that. They're not seeking wisdom. They're just seeking happiness. But for me, somebody like me, and I would imagine that it's a similar case with you. I'm on the quest for the truth, whatever that happens to be, however brutal that happens to be. I'm just driven that way. So I'm happy to compromise happiness and pleasure to learn the truth. But the only way I'm going to get to the truth and wisdom is by exposing myself to a wide variety of situations, risk being ostracized, risk being labeled strange, because I'm not talking about the same things, sports, consumerism, and entertainment, like a lot of people are. Risk social isolation for prolonged periods of time, all of that sort of stuff. But it's a conscious choice that I've made. That's the most important thing to me, and I must continue to pursue. And that's why I'm not satisfied with my professional and commercial achievements. I feel that that doesn't intrinsically satisfy me. I need to know a lot more.
Yeah, there's so much that you said. I think it's very obvious, especially now, that why they didn't teach us about the human mind, in school. It's because if they did, everybody would be able to see right through what's happening,
Well, that's right. I mean, autonomous and independent thinking means that you are able to apply lateral thinking, critical analysis. You are able to identify your own cognitive distortions and biases. You can separate facts from emotions. You can separate perspectives from facts. But if you don't have any understanding of psychology, you just basically are sucked in to your circumstance or the experience that you are experiencing at that moment in time, and you cannot evaluate it. And that's the issue. And when you can't evaluate it, and I really strongly believe that when you live like that, you're more animalistic in life and you're less godly, meaning that you don't really get a glimpse into your wisdom. You don't get a glimpse into courage. You don't get a glimpse into creativity, all the godly qualities. You become more animalistic, more competitive, more ego-based. And so wisdom is the only way that we can tap into our divine qualities. And if we choose not to have that wisdom, that's fine, but that also comes at a price. Because here's the thing, a lot of people I know who have settled for a happiness-based life. One of the things, and I don't envy that at all, because I just find them living a very boring and dull existence, right? So
I agree.
So for me, it's like, you know what?
I did that for a long time, and I wasn't even happy. Like that's what I was. You think that you've got okay, an right job, you make some money, whatever, had a company car, and all this stuff on the surface. I'm quite a successful person, but like you mentioned before, you didn't feel successful. You didn't. There's a lot going on there, and I wasn't even happy anyway. I hated my job. I had a lot of depression. A lot of issues to deal with, and I was binge drinking a lot, and so it wasn't really a life that I wanted.
Because it's boring and it lacks depth. And so you surround yourself with things that you think are going to make you happy. And we've all been there. But I know a lot of people that are still there, and it's like they're not seeing what's actually happening. Like sometimes you see people, like they've got this to a particular job level, and they've got this degree, and they're like not happy. So what do? They're not happy, so they end up doing more of the same. Oh, well, I've got a bachelor's degree, maybe a master's degree, and the next position is going to make me happy. Then that doesn't work. They'll go on a doctorate degree, and then I'll go for the next position. That's going to make me happy. Well, not really. And the thing is, Emerson once said, life is not about seeking happiness. It's about seeking a life of meaning and an honorable life. And so for me, it's, that's what, look, and like everybody else, I have a lot of questions, but I think I have less questions than the vast majority. I mean, I see the interconnectedness. I even like the intricacies of life. I think life is complex. And unless you are on this quest to seek the truth, you're not going to understand a lot of things. And you're not going to understand a lot of things. You're going to make very poor decisions.
Yeah.
And you're going to limit yourself. So I'm driven by maximization of my potential. And for that, I need to move from information towards knowledge, knowledge towards wisdom, which is only gained experientially. It can't be gained theoretically. So I must put myself in new situations. I must take new emotional and mental and financial risks. I must risk losing what I have built, because that's the only way to get to the next level. And I'm prepared to do that because I deeply understand that the whole experience of life is temporary. And so, how can I evolve at a spiritual level? So, so I like the fact that, there's chaos right now around us. You can see the world is extremely chaotic, but I'm stimulated by it. I'm not like a lot of people, getting depressed and I don't want to know this. It's too depressing, or the world has gone to shit and everything's going to end. And I'm stimulated by it. I look at it's really interesting. It's fascinating how things work. So yeah.
As somebody who's been studying human psychology for quite a while, was there anything that, upon your research for the book, that you found completely shocking, or that you didn't, that you weren't really aware of?
Well, I think, and I've kind of always known this at the back of my mind, but one of the things that was shocking to me, and I did some experiments with this. So over the last 2 years, we had two narratives that were coming through. Largely, we were getting the narrative that was coming through the mainstream, the people of authority, medical scientists that were being given exposure, mainstream media. And then we had an alternative narrative, which was coming from everyday people, scientists as well, doctors and professionals. But you could see that there was one narrative that was being given a lot more exposure and a lot more emphasis, whereas the other one was being ridiculed immediately straight off the bat there was no interest in even learning what that narrative was. And what I thought I'd do, and I had a feeling that this was going to happen, but it did shock me a little bit, because one of the things I did was I looked at all the people who I would consider to be institutionalized in my network, meaning that they've spent a considerable number of years in the education system achieving academic excellence, but they're also at the top of their game in the corporate or institutional system. And as a test, what I wanted to do was I wanted to test their open-mindedness to the alternative narrative that was coming through. And that's all it was for me. And I had a feeling that they're not going to be too open to it. But what really astounded me was how few of them even bothered to open any of the information that was sent through, and how quickly they were dismissive about any narrative that was not being endorsed by the mainstream. That was a little bit scary as well, because what I realized was I had a feeling that they're not going to be too open to it and they'll find flaws with it. But the fact that they didn't open it, because I sent it, quite a few of this through WhatsApp and Messenger, and went back and saw that literally 80-90% of them that I knew in my networks did not even open any of the stuff that I sent, whether it was a video, it was an audio file, it was a document, it didn't even get opened. So that was concerning, because what it made me realize is that an educated person would at least demonstrate curiosity about an alternative narrative and would try and reconcile to opposing truths before forming a conclusion.
That's what
and
you
that got
think.
me thinking. Well, that's but because when you're in the system, when you're working in corporate or business, these are the same people who provide you with research. They're the same people who say, look, this is how things work. But then everything's questionable, because whatever conclusions have been formed at the political level, at the scientific level, um, at the social level, judicial level, educational level, if those conclusions are being formed without curiosity to examine alternative perspectives, then that puts a lot of things, it makes a lot of things questionable.
Yeah.
So that reluctance to look at alternative information, and that with extreme willingness to dismiss things prematurely and quickly as conspiracy theories. I mean, and they very well might be conspiracy theories, but the fact that we dismiss them so quickly as conspiracy theories is a concern, right?
Mm.
Whereas, one of the things I've learned is that people who are truly open-minded can sit in this state of not knowing for long periods of time, holding two opposing views, which causes a lot of mental chaos and conflict, and not necessarily rush to form a conclusion either way, especially if it's a complex issue. Whereas what I observed in my professional colleagues was a dismissal of any information that would not support a narrative that they already believe, or if they did it with the intent of immediately finding flaws with it, but they did not
Yeah.
apply the same approach to this narrative, which was coming from the mainstream. So
Mm.
that was shocking, because that was primary research, that was first-hand observational research that I used, and I mean, I knew that there was going to be some reluctance, but it was extremely strong, and it was quite unanimous throughout that group.
What I find
So
interesting is that prior to 2020, everybody knows at least one or two conspiracy theories. You know what I mean? They've heard of them. They've heard about 9/11 or whatever. And they go, okay, yeah, yeah. They may not believe it, but maybe they just think it's stupid. But with this, it's like everyone's standpoint just got turned up 10 notches. So like you send them something, they were not going to even look at it. Whereas with 9/11, it's a little bit different. But the funny thing is that this whole narrative, and not even that, but also the jabs and everything, has really kind of just, it's like shown everybody's true colors. It's really shown what you're made of. Will you stand up for freedom? Are you open-minded? And a bunch of other things.
well, yes, and I think we're all open-minded about certain things, and we're closed-minded about certain things, and I think we're more open-minded about things that correlate to our beliefs. So I understand a bias that
Sure.
everyone has, including you and I.
Yeah.
But you're right. I do see it as a character flaw, where a person does not demonstrate any curiosity, um, and makes up their mind very quickly, and doesn't demonstrate that quest for that truth.
Mm.
To me, I definitely see how that can result in ethical and moral dilemmas and mistakes, when a person is not driven to seek the truth. They are driven to seek relief.
Right.
And if they prioritize relief over the truth, um, then they're showing their disregard for the truth. And I see that as a moral, ethical, therefore character related issue. Um, and the worst part of that has been that, you know some of those people were, your close friends and family members.
Yeah.
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 But then, if you study philosophy and history, and theology, one of the things you realize is that how we label people as good or bad based on who we get along with and who's nice to us is very superficial. Really, we need to, I think it's always very simple to label somebody as good or bad. But I think character has to be an important ingredient of goodness.
Mm.
And what I realized was that, when you actually, because I did more research into history, I realized that a lot of the atrocities on humanity were carried out by so-called good, nice, decent people.
Right.
who
were indoctrinated.
who were considered nice, yeah, who were, and you can only indoctrinate somebody if they're not a truth seeker, or they don't have the emotional fortitude or the strength of character to say no, right? So, and I know this is a controversial issue because I know this is, a lot of people are going to misunderstand this entire conversation and probably try and assassinate my character based on what I'm saying. But for me, I mean, if ultimately, how do you determine goodness of a human being if there is no moral or ethical considerations around their behavior? Because ultimately it comes down to what is right or wrong, what is good or bad, and I'm
And it's
not saying
subjective,
that I
isn't it?
have. Well, I don't know if it is. I mean, this is the thing.
In some ways, people would say, what's good or bad. It's really kind of up to the the individual. But I hear where you're coming
But
from.
I understand that. But here's the problem, right? Let's just say you and I engaged in a conflict, and let's just say I felt that the land that you're living on belongs to my ancestors. And so I felt virtuous and righteous about breaking into your house based on my belief that you did the wrong thing. Legally, it's your land, but I believe morally it isn't. So now we have a moral and ethical dilemma because
Right.
now we have two conflicting truths. You say, well, Ron, you've got your truth, I've got my truth. But whose truth should prevail in a situation when the truths conflict? And that's the issue, right? So my question was, and I didn't expect that I would end up going through this type of mental growth myself over the last 2 years. My question was, is there a universal standard of truth? Is there a standard of truth that is universally applicable to everybody? And if it is, how do you determine what that truth is? And so it's one of those things. But if we all say that you have your truth, I have my truth, what happens when those truths collide? Whose truth takes precedent? And when I started to understand this, I was like, you know what? Sometimes it feels like there is actually zero possibility of humans that were living in harmony, right? Unless we all globally accept a universal standard of truth, which is based on the high standard of morality, ethics, and goodness. But again, who's going to determine the high standard of morality, ethics, and goodness?
Yeah, I get you.
It's a complex issue, but I think right now, and I'm trying not to relate it to what's actually happening right now. I'm just talking in very general terms. But based on what's happening right now, I have observed a lot of people are not interested in the truth. A lot of people are making decisions from fear. And a lot of people are more than willing to segregate and discriminate on both sides.
Yeah.
And I see that more as a consciousness issue more than anything else.
Yeah.
Because academic and professional knowledge is not a guarantee of consciousness. In fact,
no, 100%.
I would say that in many cases it actually takes you away from your ability to think consciously.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about, and by the way, for those people who are listening to this podcast and probably wondering, what do you mean by consciousness? Well, there's biological consciousness and there's spiritual consciousness. You could have your eyes open, blinking, breathing, and you're biologically conscious, but spiritual conscious means evaluating the impact of your decisions on the world and humanity broadly. That's what we call spiritual consciousness. And I don't believe that a lot of people apply that filter before they come up with assertions, beliefs, or make assumptions or decisions.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to wrap it up pretty soon, but I wanted to ask you just a couple of business questions. So when it comes to promotion for your books, like in the past or even maybe this new one, what kind of things are you going to be doing to cut through the noise and get it out there?
I don't know if I want to cut through the noise. I think for me, I've learned to live with the noise. I think that's more important. There's a lot of stuff on social media that tells you just to do one thing and forget about everything else. I don't really want to live like that. Actually, I want to be exposed to what's happening. I want to know what's happening, but I want to get to a point where I do not allow it to alter my emotional state. So I want to be in the midst of chaos and remain calm rather than avoid chaos and remain calm. So from that perspective, for me, it's just about reconciling all these things into my life and still being able to live the life that I want, rather than hiding from what's actually happening or pretending it doesn't exist. I want to be in the midst of chaos and maintain my calm. So it's a similar thing. We have a number of businesses and brands. We do a lot of things, and people say, how are you doing so many things? For me, it's easy to reconcile. I'm a teacher. I like teaching, and everything that I do are just forms of teaching. And what are you interested in? I'm interested in shifting paradigms so that people can have better lives and lifestyles. In my mind, it's very simple. So someone might go, why are you talking about business today? Then why did you talk about spirituality? Why did you? Because the world doesn't work in silos. That's corporate thinking. That's what the academic system does. It makes you think like a specialist. But the world doesn't. There's a history connects to psychology,
Right, it's all
connects
connected.
to
Yeah.
spirituality.
Right.
Everything's connected. So when you only understand one thing in life, it's like reading one page of a good book, right? I want to try and read as many pages of the book as I can. And so I'm able to reconcile all of that because I kind of just see it as me growing and developing. I hope that next year, if you and I chat, we have a conversation at a whole new level. I want to continue to evolve my thinking, my consciousness, my ability to understand things. And that means I'm going to have to do things which are going to put me out of my comfort zone and are going to take me away from what I've always done. But I'm open to that. So I don't want people to define me based on my occupation, financial status, nationality, religion, any of those things. I just want to be known for who I am, which is based on the things that I'm doing rather than something that I didn't choose. So I'm very conscious of being pigeonholed and having a label on me because I'm going to keep evolving. So I don't think any label is going to be descriptive enough in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And for anybody who may be thinking about getting started as a writer or writing their first book, what kind of advice would you give?
I think you've got to start with your philosophy. First thing is your philosophy, and the philosophy is what's your North Star that guides everything you do. Second is your message. What is the ultimate message? Third thing is, with your message, what problem are you going to solve? What specific problem are you going to solve? Fourth is, who are you going to specifically solve that problem for? Fifth, what is so special about you or your process that is different from other people who can solve that problem as well? They'd be the first questions. They're the questions that I'd be writing. I'm in favor of people coming up with a title and subtitle for their book before they write the book. Some people say you write the book and then come up with the title and subtitle. For me, it gives me a bit of a frame. I also now do not write my books. I speak them. I actually make a dictaphone. I put up the contents page. I divide the main. I sort the book into topics and subtopics, and then I allocate specific time for each subtopic, where I will talk about the what, the why, and the how, and I usually speak it in a dictaphone. My book, in case I don't know if your question is about my book publishing process. Once I have audio files for my whole book, I usually prefer to send that to a professional editor to clean it up, and then send it to a publisher. I think the problem with typing a book and writing a book is very time consuming.
Yeah.
But speaking a book is a little bit faster. But I do think that it's important that you first clarify what's your philosophy, your message, the specific problem, the demographic that you're going to be serving, and you need to know what is unique about you or your process, why they should buy that book. For example, if you write a book on leadership today, no one's going to read it because there are thousands of books on leadership. But let me give you as an example, if you look at a guy called Patrick Lencioni, he wrote a book on leadership, except that he didn't talk about leadership. He talked about, within leadership, he talked about teamwork, and within teamwork, he talked about team conflict. So I would be advising people that if you're going to go write a book in any genre, go 2 steps deep. So take a genre, go niche, and then go micro niche. So you can go, what I would say is an inch wide and a mile deep, rather than going a mile wide and an inch deep. Certainly not to start with. I mean, I personally, I'm diversifying into a lot of other areas, but I do think it's important to gain your authority and gain your expertise in one area first before you diversify. I'm all for having multiple things. I'm a multi-potentialite. I like to have a lot of things on the go, but I do feel it's important to start with one, and build your expertise in one before you diversify. Prematurely diversifying it's not a good business decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, where can people find you? Where's the best place to get in touch with you or follow your work?
David, I'm pretty active on Instagram and LinkedIn, also on YouTube and Facebook. So I tend to be quite active, but it depends on what you're looking for. I use social platforms to bring people up from just base consciousness to level 1 or level 2. Depends on where you are in your life. If you're somebody who is already at a decent level in life, but you're ready to take it to the advanced level, you're not going to get that from merely consuming content or reading books. It's important that you commit to some sort of a structured program with accountability. But if you're somebody who's just like, wow, this is new to me, I would just say, connect with me on Instagram at Malhotra, which is my profile. LinkedIn, just look up my name. On Facebook, and just
I'll grab all the
connected.
links off you, and I'll leave them below in the description. Yeah. Fantastic, Ron. Well, thank you for your time. Is there anything you'd like to leave on?
No, I just want to say thank you. Well, thank you for bringing these types of unconventional conversations to the public. I just think that anyone right now, anyone, whether they're in the healing space, coaching space, we have to understand, in case people are wondering, why are there so many people doing this? You have to understand our whole education and work system is broken. So the emergence of people like David, myself, are people who are just not satisfied with the system, and we just want to raise topics that are not commonly brought up. And we don't believe that anyone can move towards a solution unless we understand the problem, the cause of the problem, the impact of the problem, and have dialogue. And I think that's what we're trying to do. So I support any such initiative, and thank you for considering me for the opportunity. And I would just say to people, I've mentioned those 3 elements. If you feel like you're not inspired, you're lacking meaning, or you feel like you don't have the life or lifestyle that you want, you don't have choices, you feel like you lack self-esteem, I can assure you, if you take one of those 3 elements that I have talked about and you work on them, you will find that the quality of your decision making and the quality of life will improve dramatically.
Fantastic. Thanks once again, Ron.
Thank you, David. Thanks again.
Take care.